Hey everyone, this is Adam and welcome to episode 4 of The Power of Bold. Welcome back to The Power of Bold. My name's Adam Pascarella, and I'm the host of this podcast. I really want to thank you for tuning in. Now, this is the 4th episode of The Power of Bold, and I'm so appreciative of everyone who's downloaded it and listened to the first 3 episodes. We're now in the Google Play Store, so that's very exciting as well. And I also appreciate your patience as I hear from all of you and decide whether I want to alter the direction of the podcast or not. Now, as I said in the first episode, this is all an experiment. I may take this a few different ways, but whichever route I take, I want to make sure that I'm providing the most value to you, the listener. Now, whether you're thinking of starting a business or looking to advance your career, I want to provide you with the best actionable insights as you work to live boldly and achieve your goals. That's the overall vision, and I'll work to emphasize this within each episode. So just to recap for the new listeners out there, Episode 1 focused on introducing the podcast, and I gave you a few insights on how to break out of a slump or a rut. Episode 2 focused on the value of networking events, and ways to maximize your time if you do decide to attend such networking events. And Episode 3 reviewed Felix Dennis's book, How to Get Rich. Now, before we get started here, I want to briefly apologize for the delay in releasing this latest episode. Last week was one of the busiest weeks of the year for me, and most significantly, I moved apartments in New York City. And if you live in New York or have lived here before, you know how much work is involved in moving. But now that I moved in, I'm back to releasing new episodes. I may be releasing episodes weekly or bi-weekly, I'm still debating this, but I'll let you know as I keep experimenting. Now, with all of that said, let's jump right into the substance of this episode, which is focused on thinking and acting like some of the most elite members of the U.S. military. I've always been a fan of documentaries, and with services like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, and others, there are so many options for us to entertain ourselves while being educated in the process. There's really so much good content out there that it's hard to separate the good from the great. But looking back at the documentaries that I've seen, I can unequivocally say that there has been one that has not only been entertaining, but also enlightening on the human condition, the importance of willpower, having a positive attitude, and never quitting. I'm talking about the Discovery Channel documentary, Navy SEALs BUD/S Class 234. Now, this is a 6-hour documentary series that was created by the Discovery Channel in 2002, and it documents candidates for Navy SEAL training and the trials and tribulations that they go through in order to survive. It's a stellar documentary that is for people who are interested or even not interested in the military. On one level, it's about the physical training that these candidates face. But on another level, the documentary shows the importance of willpower and mental strength, and I'll speak about all of this throughout the episode. But before talking about the documentary itself, I want to give a brief introduction about Navy SEALs and their training. There's so much information on the internet, and you can spend a ton of time poring over the details. But I'm just going to give a brief summary here, and then I'll provide some links in the show notes to more resources that I found interesting. Navy SEALs were first established by President Kennedy in 1962, and the Navy SEALs website describes Navy SEALs as being created as a small, elite maritime military force that conducts unconventional warfare. They're known for being so-called frogmen, and they conduct missions in various situations, but most notably in shallow waters where submarines and other ships can't reach. But beyond operating in water, SEAL itself stands for sea, air, and land. Navy SEALs can operate in all environments and in extremely challenging circumstances. They're the so-called tip of the spear. They engage in operations in the furthest corners of the globe and in some of the worst situations imaginable. SEALs have a long and renowned history of excellence, from their work in the Vietnam War to operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it seems like Navy SEALs really entered the public consciousness when SEAL Team 6, which is the most elite Navy SEAL team, killed Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. And since then, Navy SEALs have been thought of as essentially America's superheroes. They're our best and brightest, and they're at the forefront in combating terrorism and fighting America's enemies around the globe. Now, ever since the raid on Osama bin Laden's compound in Pakistan, average Americans want to learn about Navy SEALs, whether it's kids growing up in the Midwest, or even corporate executives who want to apply the SEALs mindset to their own lives and the lives of their employees. There are a good number of books out there that talk about this, and some examples that come to mind are William McRaven's Make Your Bed, Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership, and The Way of the SEAL by Mark Devine. Now, these books mostly relay information that these former SEALs learned while in training and while being deployed, and the stories are really fascinating. These are all great books, and I'd recommend that you check them out if you're looking to learn more. But beyond these books and the documentary series I'm going to speak about, people sign up to willingly replicate Navy SEAL training. One such company offering these services is the SEAL Fit Extreme Kokoro campaign, where you can simulate the so-called Hell Week which is found in Navy SEAL training. There's been lots of interest in recent years in CrossFit training, Tough Mudders, and other extreme fitness training. And these Navy SEAL boot camps, for lack of a better word, seem to be another level higher than that. They're fully immersive programs. And sure, the physical training is difficult, but these boot camps stress the mental part of training, which is super critical. I've never done something like this, but it looks like something that will not only push your boundaries, but it'll teach you that those boundaries are often artificial. They're just things that your mind creates, and these are things that can be overcome. I'll speak about this more later in the episode. But now, back to the documentary, which again is called Navy SEALs BUD/S Class 234. While episodes of the documentary often appear on YouTube, you can buy the whole documentary on Amazon. The documentary focuses on candidates attempting to become Navy SEALs, and specifically it films candidates at BUD/S training. BUD/S stands for Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. BUD/S is a 6-month training course held in Coronado, California, and there are 4 distinct stages of training. First, there's a preliminary indoctrination and pre-training period, which is about 6 weeks, and then there are the 3 phases of BUD/S, which last for the remainder of the time. The first phase of BUD/S consists of 8 weeks of basic conditioning and training. Now, if you know anything about SEAL training, this is most likely what you're thinking of. The first phase includes grueling exercises and physical training that includes the notorious Hell Week, where candidates get about 4 to 5 hours of sleep while constantly training over a 5-day period. It's totally insane. Now, I just want to spend a few seconds reading to you a description of what Navy SEAL training is like. And this is from the Navy SEALs themselves. I'll have a link to this resource in the show notes. It says that first phase is the toughest. It consists of 8 weeks of basic conditioning that peaks with a grueling segment called Hell Week at the midway point, where you'll be tested to your limits. Hell Week is a test of physical endurance, mental tenacity, and true teamwork, where 2/3 or more of your class may call it quits or quote-unquote ring the bell. Physical discomfort and pain will cause many to decide it isn't worth it. The miserable, wet cold approaching hypothermia will make others quit. Sheer fatigue and sleep deprivation will cause every candidate to question his core values, motivations, limits, and everything he's made of and stands for. Those who grit it out to the finish will hear their instructors yell the longed-for words, Hell Week is secured. There will be an exceptional few with burning desire who persevere when their bodies are screaming to quit, yet continue on. These men experience a tremendous sense of pride, achievement, brotherhood, and a new self-awareness that I can do anything. Now, this excerpt is just one perspective on first phase training, and it goes to show how difficult it is. Moving on from first phase, second phase is 8 weeks of dive training, which is technical and physically and mentally challenging. It's difficult for many people since they don't have any prior dive experience. The candidates are operating on little sleep, while they simultaneously have to know and memorize complicated dive procedures. As far as the third phase, it's 9 weeks of land warfare training, which again is extremely challenging both on the physical and mental side. Upon passing all of these phases, the candidates graduate, and then they proceed to the actual substantive training to become a Navy SEAL. Passing BUD/S is only the beginning of their training. The documentary mostly focuses on Phase 1, which again is the basic conditioning phase, with 4 episodes focused on that, and again the episodes are 1 hour each. One episode focuses on Phase 2 and one on Phase 3 leading up to graduation. As you can tell from the title, the documentary follows Class 234, which was from the early 2000s. You see the candidates go through their intense physical training, face the stress and sheer exhaustion of Hell Week, the challenges of learning how to dive like Navy SEALs, and putting it all together in time for graduation. The documentary was filmed around the time that reality TV was starting to become big, so they seemingly filmed it like a reality show. You're introduced to certain characters who are actually real people who are trying to become Navy SEALs. You follow them through the program. Some of them drop out and others make it. It provides some good continuity as you're learning about the training and requirements that the candidates need to fulfill. As just one example, one of the candidates, Justin Legg, graduated as a Navy SEAL. He was deployed twice to the Middle East, and he had a 7-month tour in Iraq as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. After developing some severe medical issues upon returning home, he became the first double-lung transplantee to climb Mount McKinley and to run 3 half marathons. And again, it just goes to show what these people can do is truly insane. And besides the candidates themselves, you get to know the instructors in the documentary. They're not only strict, but they're funny as hell. You can tell that they take their job very seriously. They only want the best of the best joining their tight-knit community. And it shows. Entering classes often start with about 100 to 150 people, and BUD/S has about an 80% failure rate or even higher. Ultimately, I'd highly recommend checking out the documentary. Like I said, there are 6 episodes and they're about 1 hour each, so it's not too long. And beyond the actual entertainment aspect of the documentary, there are some really important insights that we can learn and use in our own lives. Now, I'm obviously not saying that you're going to have the mental strength of a Navy SEAL after watching the documentary. But whether you're going through a difficult time or want to learn how to maximize your output at work or in your career, this documentary can really help you gain a unique perspective on the challenges that you're facing. I find it extremely useful whenever I'm feeling down or whenever I need a good pick-me-up. It works every single time. And more importantly, it keeps things in perspective. Whatever problem I'm facing isn't nearly as bad as what these Navy SEALs have to go through in training. Now, with that said, I want to move beyond the basics and talk about insights from the documentary that we can apply to our own lives. In this episode, I'm going to speak about 4 insights that you can take from the documentary. Again, these aren't all the insights that you could gather, and to get the full brunt of all of this, I would highly recommend watching the entire series. But with that said, let's proceed. I think that the most important insight that you can gather is the importance of mental strength over physical strength. This point is huge, and it's repeatedly emphasized throughout the documentary. You can be a star high school football player in the best shape of your life, but if you aren't mentally strong enough, you're not going to survive training. The question for us is why this is, and how we can apply this insight to our own lives. Sure, everyone gets beat in training, and everyone's pushed to their physical limit. But the true reality is that the instructors are trying to push the candidates' mental limits almost more than their physical limits. In the documentary, you often see instructors targeting the strongest man in one of the candidate teams to see how he and the team would react to stress, and usually the strategy would be effective in causing chaos. As a simple description of this, I want to read off an excerpt from an ebook by a former Navy SEAL, which describes BUD/S training. The author says the following: during physical training, while the class was doing high repetitions of some grueling exercise for over an hour, everyone would become thoroughly tired to the point of being in pain. In come the instructors with their mind games. They would pick out someone in the formation who was holding up well despite the grueling exercise. They would gather around this individual and start shouting and hollering at him. They would tell the whole class in a loud, firm voice that because Petty Officer so-and-so isn't putting out and doing the exercise correctly, we are going to start all over from the beginning. This simple, albeit sadistic, maneuver was very effective at bringing certain unwanted traits out into the light of day. Some guys would totally lose their cool. The instructors just observed and made notes. They would increase their harassment of those individuals in the weeks to come, and would, in most cases, succeed in getting them to quit. And they made quitting easy and honorable. It seemed like every day the instructors would ask 10 times, "Okay, who wants to quit? Just ring the bell and get back to a normal life." As simple as this sounds, it was very effective. Hearing that all day, day after day, in the morning, before every evolution, after every evolution, while we were wet and cold and miserable, it took its toll. And as you can see in the documentary, pushing the candidate's mental and physical limits is often done with the instructors putting the candidates in extremely uncomfortable positions. And the most significant exercise that comes to mind is so-called water torture. The instructors make the candidates get wet and sandy. They get wet from head to toe by going into the surf, and then they roll around in the sand on the beach, making their bodies feel extremely uncomfortable. And all the while they're wet and sandy, they have to go back and do physical training. Doing this day after day becomes extremely frustrating, and it can break a person down, especially during Hell Week. One of the most intriguing parts of the documentary is when the instructors make the candidates complete a 50-meter swim, where the candidates need to swim the entire length while holding their breath. It's an extremely difficult task, and some candidates pass out as they approach the last few meters. But as long as they touch the wall, even when passing out, they pass the exercise, which is called an evolution in SEAL language. And after the candidates pass the evolution in the documentary, the chief instructor tells the candidates, "You just proved to your bodies, through your mind, that you can push yourself a lot further than you thought possible." And I think that this is such an important insight. Throughout the documentary, the BUD/S instructors emphasize that winning is a conscious decision. In our lives, we may be facing struggles, whether they're financially related to our careers, or even related to our personal lives. And these struggles exist, whether they're so-called first world problems or not. In reality, though, a lot of the problem is more mental than anything. It's amazing how much the mind controls our thoughts and actions, both consciously and subconsciously. In Navy SEAL training, recruits simply decide if they want to be there or not. This brings to mind the famous quote, which states, "If you think you can or can't, you're right." I've always heard this quote and thought about it, but it really came to life for me when watching this documentary. Those candidates that survived training made a decision in their minds, whether it was subconscious or not, that they would do anything to make it through the worst parts of training, regardless of the physical challenges that were in front of them. Their mental will triumphed over the physical stresses that they were feeling, notwithstanding whether they were the biggest guy or the guy seemingly appearing to be a SEAL when walking into training. It's a lesson that we can apply to each of our lives, regardless of our career or societal status. Our attitudes and mental strength play a disproportionate impact on whether we're able to achieve our goals. And really, the bottom line is that when you're traveling through hell, you have to keep going. The second insight is somewhat related to the first. And that insight is that you may need to sacrifice more than you ever imagined to achieve your goals. This is a pretty obvious point, but I want to elaborate on it here. Many of the Navy SEAL candidates interviewed by the documentary team claim that they wanted to be SEALs since they were little kids, yet few of them ultimately graduate. Why is that? I'm sure everyone has their reasons, but it seems like a large part of it is that they simply didn't lack the commitment. Sure, they had the desire to complete the training, but it wasn't a burning desire. You often hear this not only in the documentary, but in other books that talk about SEAL training, and that's the fact that many of the candidates would rather die than quit. That is the amount of commitment that is required. As just one example, in the Hell Week episode of the documentary, which is episode 4, you see the candidates being pushed to the limit after days and nights with little to no sleep. He didn't know it at the time, but one candidate actually suffered a serious leg injury during training. The remaining candidates are on the ground after an evolution, and you can see this guy crawling, trying to shuffle his body to get to the group. He's in agony, yet he knows that this is the type of effort that is required to complete the training. He ultimately gets to the pile, and he successfully completes Hell Week. It's pretty miraculous, and it shows how committed he was to completing training, even though he was in excruciating pain. Along with this, as I said, candidates are frequently passing out in the 50-meter underwater swim. They're willing to push their bodies to the physical limit to achieve their goals. And this is also the case when SEAL candidates engage in so-called drown-proofing, where they learn how to stay underwater for longer periods of time than they could have possibly imagined. Obviously, this is all the extreme part of the spectrum, but the lesson still stands. You often have to expend more effort than you thought possible to achieve your goals. For me, what comes to mind is the idea of burning the boats behind you in order to accomplish your goals. This involves the well-known story of Captain Hernan Cortez, who in the 16th century was trying to begin a conquest in modern-day Mexico. Upon landing at the beach, he ordered his men to burn his boats. There would be no backup plan. They would have to emerge victorious, otherwise they would all perish. There would be no retreat. Now, there's something to be said about adopting this attitude to our own lives. Whatever your goals, I think that we have to be all in to maximize our odds of achieving them. And at least in the startup world, which I'm currently focused on, a good number of investors won't finance an entrepreneur's company unless they quit their job to pursue it full time. And I think this makes sense. Being all in signals that you're willing to do whatever is necessary to make your young company survive. Ultimately, sacrifice is going to be required, whatever your goals are. When it becomes difficult, you have to rise up to the challenge and have such a burning desire to overcome obstacles. And this is what Napoleon Hill talks about in Think and Grow Rich. Success is a result from a burning desire to achieve your goals, along with a stellar work ethic. The burning desire portion is a huge component of this. Simple desire isn't enough. You need to be all in and willing to sacrifice things that you may hold dear. Things like work-life balance, or even Netflix on the weekends. Things like this. By foregoing these things, you'll increase your odds of success in whatever goal that you have. Now, for the third insight, I want to speak about the value of the team over the individual, and the importance of strong leadership. These are so critical in BUD/S and in the Navy SEALs altogether. In their missions, individuals fail, only teams survive. And along with this, leadership is a huge tenet of SEAL training. Former Navy SEALs say that there are no bad teams, there are just bad leaders. And you can see this in the documentary, when the instructors organize races among the candidates. Now, just to be clear, almost every training exercise in BUD/S is a competition. And typically the candidates are separated out into teams by height. One such competition involves races where teams have to run the length of the beach with a heavy inflatable boat on top of their heads. The teams that succeed are not those necessarily with the quote-unquote strongest guys. They're the ones with the guys that work together, give 100%, and are led by a strong leader who takes accountability for the team's actions. In fact, the shortest group, called the Smurfs, often finishes first in many races in the documentary. They don't appear to be the strongest on first glance, but they're led by a great leader, and they have a solid group of sled dogs, as the instructors call them. Whether they have to carry boats on their heads or lift logs weighing hundreds of pounds, they're a unit that can't be stopped. The sum of the team is stronger and more accomplished than any of the individual members. Now, the actionable insight is the following. No person is an island. Regardless of what your goals are, you'll need some help to accomplish them. This will maximize your odds of success. By pursuing your goals alone, or by alienating those who could potentially help you, you're setting yourself up to fail. I'm not saying that you should explicitly use people in a selfish way, but when looking to find people to help you achieve your goals, say if you're looking to start a business, you need to find those sled dogs. You need to find those people that believe in the mission, that will carry their weight, and will work cohesively with the unit in pursuit of that mission. And I think along with this, pedigree doesn't necessarily matter. Just as the strongest looking guy or the most athletic appearing guy doesn't necessarily mean that that person will survive BUD/S. Hiring or working with someone from a prestigious school, for instance, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have as much impact as you expect. And with this, the flip side is also true. The person who dropped out of college or doesn't have a blue chip resume may be the exact type of person that you need to get you across the finish line. If you look at sports teams or just in the corporate environment itself, teams matter over superstars or other high-performing individuals. It's important to keep this point in mind. And you as a leader need to take extreme ownership of the people below you. holding yourself accountable for their mistakes and encouraging them to keep going, even in the darkest or lowest points. Ultimately, the buck stops with you. Now, there's a point in the documentary during the Hell Week episode. The officers are taken aside by the instructors. As a clarifying point, officers train alongside the enlisted men. The officers are falling asleep as they're listening to the instructors. They're so fatigued, they can't stay awake. But the instructors make a great point, that these officers weren't motivating their teams well enough. The instructors say if the team can see the officers with their heads down and feeling sorry for themselves, they're not going to feel motivated. But if they see their officers with a big, great smile on their face as the worst pain is coming, they'll be inspired to act. This is a great point about leadership. People below you are watching you. Sometimes you just need to fake it until you make it, even if you're feeling the pain 10 times as much as the people below you. It's an obvious point, but a great team plus a great leader will set you up for success. And finally, the fourth out of many possible insights that I could share from the documentary is summed up just in a few words, and that is, it pays to be a winner. This is one of the mottos of buds trading. Winning means everything, and second place is first loser. Winning is greatly rewarded in buds training. Often, the team that finishes first in a race is allowed to rest for a bit. And this effect compounds, especially during Hell Week. The winning team members can take a very brief nap, which is so critical since candidates typically only get 4 to 5 hours of sleep during Hell Week. And plus, winning builds cohesion within the group, which can pay dividends in future races. On the flip side, the team that finishes in last place is punished hard. They may have to do extra repetitions of an exercise, or be forced to get wet and sandy. And this sort of punishment also compounds, and it becomes more and more difficult to escape last place in future races. The worst punishment is being forced to do exercises with a huge log that is affectionately called Old Misery. It's a 400-pound log, and with about 5 guys, each guy is performing physically exhausting exercises for lengthy periods of time. They just get broken down, and it's really hard to get back up to competing for first place in many of the future races. So I guess the lesson is that life isn't full of participation trophies. Things aren't always going to work out. Not everyone can win. This is just the way that life is. Especially if you're trying to create something new or create a business, as I am right now. The market doesn't care about your pedigree or what you've done in the past. Winning is what matters. There are competitors and others who want to do the same thing as you, and you have to outcompete them. As Mark Cuban says, business is the ultimate competitive sport. There are always people trying to kill you and trying to outcompete you. But going back to the lesson I just mentioned, the team is critical to winning. You cannot do it alone. You need team members that are cognizant of the goal and who are willing to put out in order to succeed. With that said, though, it's not totally black and white. There has to remain an emphasis on winning, obviously within the law and within ethical restraints. But the fact remains that it pays to be a winner. You see it in buds training, and you see it in other parts of life. So to sum all of this up, these are just 4 insights from the documentary, and there are many, many more. Navy SEALs Buds Class 234 is one of my favorite documentaries, not only for its entertainment value, but for the actionable insights that it provides to us as ambitious, hungry people looking to supercharge our careers. For more insights that you can apply to your own life, I'd highly recommend that you view the entire series. So, thanks again for tuning into this episode of The Power of Bold. I hope you enjoyed my review of Navy SEALs Buds Class 234. Feel free to subscribe to future episodes, and please leave a review on iTunes or Google Play if you can. I greatly appreciate it. If you're looking for the show notes, please visit thepowerofbold.com. And if you'd like, you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @apascar, APASCAR. Until next time, take care.